Hello there, welcome or welcome back to my channel, or if you're new here, hi, my name is Samantha and this is my channel where I talk all about books. Anyway, today I'm coming to you with my October wrap-up, and I'm also going to be doing a little bit of a November TBR, just so that I remember what books I'm planning to read this month, because there are certain books that I really want to read in the autumn, and I didn't get to them last year. I'm like, if I don't get to them this year, I'm going to be so annoyed at myself. So, because I feel like they're very much seasonal specific reads, I want to make sure I'm prioritizing them in November. So I thought I would make a TBR video, even though I don't normally do them unless I'm doing a readathon, which I'm not. However, I did participate in the Spookoplathon in October, which is Becca's readathon from Becca and the Books, based on her Bookopoly TBR game. So yeah, I participated in that, and I did a couple of reading vlogs for that. So a lot of the books that I read in October, I've already talked about at length in those videos. So I will point you to the relevant video when we get to that book, and I probably won't go into a lot of detail about the books because I've already done that in a dedicated reading vlog. But yeah, we're gonna go over my statistics for October, as well as all the books that I read, what I rated them, and then I will give reviews of books that I feel like I have more to say about. And then we'll get into the November TBR. But I don't really have much else to say beyond the fact that I only read 4 books because, as I've already mentioned in those reading vlogs that I talked about, I got married in October at the beginning of the month, and I also went on my honeymoon, and so I did not read nearly as much as I thought I was gonna read. But I should have known that. I knew I was gonna be busy, and I should have known how busy I was gonna be, but I really thought I was gonna read more than I did. But it's okay, it's fine. Anyway, as usual, I'm going to start off with my statistics, which I get from Storygraph. So let's start a little screen recording and go over all of these statistics. So in the month of October, I read, as I said, 4 books. I also had a DNF, but I won't really talk about that here because it's for a secret TBR video, which I'm so close to being finished because I feel like I've spoken about this in every wrap-up since August. I've spoken about this freaking video, and it's just because I've taken a really long time to read all the books. But it will be finished this month, no matter what. I read 4 books, I DNF'd 1. I read a total of 1,991 pages, and I listened to about 15 hours of audiobook. And my average time to finish a book was 10 days, which was partially skewed because of the book that I read at the very beginning of the month, which took me 2 weeks to read it because I started it and then just did not continue because I was getting married, so I just didn't even think about reading. Slightly skewed because of that. I'd say it was more like a week typically. In terms of my moods, all 4 of the books I read were adventurous. 2 were lighthearted, 2 emotional, 1 tense, 1 mysterious, 1 hopeful, and 1 dark. In terms of the pace, all of the books that I read were medium paced. I had 1 book under 300 pages, 2 books between 300 and 499 pages, and 1 book that was over 500 pages. In terms of my fiction, non-fiction split, as usual, I only read fiction, which is such a shame because I was supposed to be reading 1 non-fiction book a month, and I've definitely fallen behind. I think I've read 7 in the year, so if I could get to 10, that would be great, but I just don't know if I'm going to be reading 3 non-fictions before the end of the year, so we'll see about that. In terms of my genre, all of the books I read were fantasy. 3 of them were fantasy romance. 1 was classified as young adult, but I think it's new adult. We'll get to that when we get to that. And 1 was also classified as contemporary. For the format, I read 1 book digitally and I read 3 books in print. I had an average rating of 3.44, which is not great, although I feel like it's better than it's been in recent months. I really haven't had the best reading time recently, partially because of this video that I'm doing. But yeah, I rated 2 books 3 stars, 1 book 3.75, and 1 book 4 stars. So not really the best reading month, as you can see, because my highest rating was a 4 star. I don't normally go over this anymore, but I thought this would be kind of fun to look at. This is the pages and minutes that I read in October, but as you can see, there was absolutely nothing until the 10th, which is not actually entirely correct. I did start a book before, but I just hadn't updated it, and then I guess I picked it back up on the 10th. And yeah, there were a few times where I didn't read anything because I was away on my honeymoon, and then at the end of the month I was really trying to finish things. So yeah, some pretty high numbers there. But yeah, those are all of the statistics. How do I finish this? There we go. And now let's get into the books that I read and what I rated them, and then I'll do little reviews of things that I think I have a lot to say about. So the first book that I finished in the month of October was The Wedding Witch by Erin Sterling. This was an arc that I had, but it's already out, and I gave this 3 stars. Then I read The Crimson Moth by Kristen Cicerelli, and I gave this 3.75 stars. Then I tackled The Behemoth, that is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas, and I gave this 3 stars. And finally, I read The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Leong, and I gave this 4 stars. This is also an arc and it's coming out on the 5th of November. But yeah, those were all the books and what I rated them. And now I'll do like little reviews for everything. But like I said, I've already reviewed most of these books in detail in other videos. So for those books, it will be really brief. But yeah, going from worst to best, I'm going to go with my biggest disappointment, which was The Wedding Witch by Erin Sterling. This is the third book in the X-Hex series, which is basically a trilogy of like standalone but interconnected witchy fantasy romance books. I loved the X-Hex and the Kiss Curse. For me, they're such fun, cozy, hocus pocus vibes, witchy rom-coms, and they're actually the only witchy rom-coms I've read and loved. I've had such bad luck with other witchy rom-coms, which I really thought was a genre that I was going to love, but from what I've read, these have been the only successful books. So I was really disappointed to read this one, and it was kind of a flop for me. This book took me a really long time to read. I just could not force myself to read it. Even when I was on planes, I thought like, you know, I have nothing else to do, so surely I must read, and I just didn't want to. So unfortunately, I didn't really like it that much, and I was quite disappointed with it. It wasn't a bad book necessarily, but I think it didn't have the same charm as the first two for me. But this book basically follows the middle brother of the Penhallow boys, and his name is Bowen or Bowen. I don't really know. Let's call him Bowen. His name is Bowen, and he is basically like very introverted. He's always referred to as like the mountain man. Like he lives on a mountain by himself, has like a very scruffy beard. He's like very rural and isolated, and that's the way he likes it. But he ends up having to enlist the help of this human woman called Tamsin, and she is basically, like I said, a human. However, she's involved in like the trade of magical artifacts, so she will collect them and put herself in sort of dangerous situations. And basically we start the book a year in advance on Christmas Eve, and they are having their first meeting, and at the very end of the meeting, before they officially agree to work together, they end up kissing. From that, they are working together, but they're trying to deny their feelings for each other because they don't want to mix business and a relationship. So yeah, for the whole rest of the year, we get their little texts and stuff like that, but we mainly skip to the following Christmas, where Tamsin is going on this risky mission to collect an artifact from this old manor, and Bowen is also there. Did I call him Bowen before and I'm switching Bowen? I don't know what to call him. Bowen is there, and it's basically haunted, and they end up getting sent back in time to the 60s, and they have to figure out how to get back to their present time. I just thought that the chemistry wasn't there between them. That was part of my problem with it. I also just didn't really enjoy the story. I thought that the stakes didn't feel that high, considering the fact that they were actually very high. But ultimately, the main issue I had with it was the romance. I just didn't like it. I didn't feel their connection. I didn't enjoy the smut scenes. Unfortunately, this one was not for me. But it's not a bad book. I just didn't think it measured up to the previous two books for me personally. So yeah, 3 stars. It was okay. Kind of festive. If you want to keep the Halloween mood going, but you also want to get more festive for the holiday season, then maybe this is a good one for you to pick up. But like I said, I gave it 3 stars. My next disappointing read, another sequel, was A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J Maas. I'm not going to go into this one in depth at all because I went into a lot of detail in my vlogs because I was sort of reacting as I read it. But if you don't know, this is the 4th book in the A Court of Thorns and Roses series, but it's following different characters as the central characters in this book to the rest of the series. However, those characters are still very present in this book, and it was really annoying. That was something I didn't like about it, was I just want to say goodbye to those characters, kind of. They can still be around, but I don't need their relationship to be a main focus, and I felt like it still was, even though this should be Nesta and Cassian's story. It was also just way too smutty. I think she could have cut 150 pages, and that would have only been smut. So yeah, don't pick this one up if you don't like smutty books. I also just thought the smut wasn't written well, personally, so I just had a lot of issues with this book. But what I did absolutely love about this book was the female friendship, the representation of that. It was really beautiful, and just Nesta's healing journey. Loved that. Hated the rest of it. So I settled on a 3 stars. Honestly, those bits kind of redeemed it for me almost, but I was still very disappointed with this, and I don't have high hopes for the next book. I think that she's going to ruin the male love interest in that. I think she's going to absolutely ruin him, and I'm not looking forward to it at all. I will read it, but I'm sad. But if you don't know, A Court of Thorns and Roses is a Beauty and the Beast retelling, loosely following a main girly, Feyre. Feyre's family is quite destitute, and she ends up having to go hunting for them to keep them alive. She's hunting one day, she kills a wolf. Turns out the wolf is actually a fairy. So this guy, Tamlin, comes knocking on her door, and he says, hey, you killed one of my people, so now you have to come live with me. This is like a life for a life, and that's where everything starts, but it really goes from there. This book is like completely different from that. But yeah, if you haven't read A Court of Thorns and Roses, that's where you start. That's what you're getting, and it's very different as the series goes on. I feel like I'm being so unenthusiastic, but it's just because I feel like you've read it or you haven't, and I feel like you're not going to if you haven't already. but maybe I'm wrong. But I feel like everyone knows already what it's about. The next one that was also a little bit disappointing was The Crimson Moth by Kristen Cicerelli. This one was just disappointing because of how high my hopes were, because I read Serpent and Dove earlier this year and I loved that. And these books are quite similar in theme. They're both a witch hunter romance where being a witch is illegal and witches are persecuted and basically all killed off. But in this book, we're following our main character Rune, and she's a witch, and during the day she sort of comes across as this airhead socialite character, but under the cover of night she actually rescues witches who have been captured and helps smuggle them off of this island to a place where magic is legal. And basically her best friend Alex, his older brother, is the captain of the Blood Guard, which are the sort of soldiers that hunt down the witches. His name is Gideon, and basically at the start of the book Gideon is starting to suspect Rune, and Rune wants to get closer to Gideon to get his intel to find out where they're keeping this witch. And so she starts trying to court him to get information, and he starts trying to court her to figure out if she is a witch and if she is the Crimson Moth, and it just goes from there. And I enjoyed this book, but as I said, I think Serpent and Dove was a lot better for me personally. I don't know what it was, but I just really enjoyed Serpent and Dove, and this one was kind of a letdown. I just felt like there were a couple pacing issues, and also a lot of it was really obvious, although the same can be said for Serpent and Dove. But I don't know, it was just things that were supposed to be this big reveal, and I was like, yeah, I need that from like page 5. It was a little bit disappointing, but I still did enjoy it, and I will definitely read the sequel. I think it's coming out early next year, and it's only a duology, so I will definitely be reading that. And finally, the last book that I read in October, and my favorite book of the month, was The Teller of Small Fortunes by Julie Long. As I said, I've already spoken about this one as well in a different reading vlog, but I will tell you about it because it is an art, and you might not have heard of it. But this is a cozy fantasy following our main character, Tao. Tao is a traveling fortune teller, but she only tells people small fortunes because she believes that bigger fortunes are dangerous. So she doesn't want to tell those. She focuses on small fortunes, and she's traveling around, running from a bit of a mysterious past, and she basically comes across some other characters who are on a mission, and they all sort of team up to help one of the characters with their mission. And it's very much like a found family, very sweet, wholesome story. The stakes are actually kind of high, but it's not in like a tense way. Like there's nothing that makes you that worried. Like I think the whole time you feel like everything is going to be okay in the end. Yeah, this was a really sweet story. I really enjoyed it. Not my favorite book I've ever read, but if you like cozy fantasy, I would definitely recommend this. Also, the cover is just so cute. But yeah, those are all of the books that I read in October. Okay, so now moving on to the November TBR, which is a pretty hefty stack. And there are also 3 ebooks on this list, so we'll see if this actually happens. But let's start with the carryovers from October. So first of all, I want to finish reading Throne of the Fallen by Carrie Maniscalco. As you can see, I'm currently reading this. I'm about 300 pages in, although this book is about 575 pages, so I still have quite a way to go. I am actually really enjoying this book, but I'm just reading it so slowly. I don't know why, but I just cannot read it faster. I'd say typically in an hour I would read 60 pages, but with this it's more like 45 to 50 pages. So yeah, definitely reading it slower than my usual pace, but I am enjoying it. The only thing I will say is that this is a spin-off of the Kingdom of the Wicked series, which I did not realize, and initially it wasn't a problem. Now I feel like it's not that it's a problem, but I feel like I would have benefited from having read the initial series first. I'm still like understanding things, but I think I would have a better understanding of things if I'd read that first. But it's okay. But if you don't know what this book is about, this book basically follows our main character Camilla, and it's kind of set in like a Regency era, and she is a painter. She has no family left, and she's made a mistake, which is actually a really big mistake, and so she ends up having to enter into a bargain with Envy, who's one of the princes of sin from like the 7 deadly sins, and they rule the 7 realms of the underworld, I guess. And basically he is involved in a game and he needs Camilla, so they end up working together and traveling through the underworld to try and complete this game because it will benefit both of them. And that's all I really want to say. It is a fantasy romance, so there is some romance involved in this, and I'm enjoying it. Like I said, I am enjoying it. I kind of wish I'd read The Kingdom of the Wicked first, but here we are. I'm really enjoying this though, and I will be finishing this very soon, hopefully. Another carryover I have from October is Fear the Flames by Olivia Rose Darling. I didn't actually start this one in the end, but this was on my Spookoplathon TBR and I didn't get to it, and I would really like to read it in November because I feel like it would be a good autumnal book, and also just because I bought it recently, so I want to read it. Like, I'm really in the mood for it. But I don't know a ton about this beyond the fact that I believe it is a dragon romantasy. So let me read you what it says. No one in Imarath had ever seen a dragon until 5 eggs, long thought fossils, hatched in the presence of their young princess, Elwyn Atara. Fearing the power his daughter would wield revealed through her soul bond with the creatures, King Garrick imprisoned her for many years, desperately trying to break the bond that united them, until a daring rescue saved Elwyn from his clutches, but left her 5 precious dragons at his mercy. Years later, Elwyn is now a woman determined to free her dragons. Having established a queendom of her own, she's ready to do whatever is necessary to save her people from starvation and seek vengeance against her father, even if that means leaving the home she built for herself, or having to ally with the commander of Veraveth, Caden Vels, the most feared and dangerous man in all the kingdoms of Ravarin and her father's sworn enemy. The pull between Elwyn and Caden becomes impossible to resist, even when trusting each other seems both reckless and essential. But with the threat of war looming over them, the imminent heist to rescue Elwyn's dragons will be their most dangerous adventure yet. So this sounds like it's actually going to be more fantasy leading than romantasy. So maybe this is more of like a fantasy romance than a romantasy. But I don't know, we'll see. I'm excited. I feel like this is going to be very dragon heavy, which I'm quite excited for. That's the next one on the TBR. Another carryover from October, which I definitely need to read early on in the month, is The Courting of Bristol Keats by Mary E. Pearson. This is an arc that I have and it's coming out on the 14th of November, I believe. And I was supposed to read this for one of my Bookoplathon prompts, but I ran out of time, as you can imagine. So yes, I definitely like to get to this one early on. I don't exactly remember what this one is about, beyond it being an adult romantasy with fae, and I do believe that the main character, Bristol Keats, her family has disappeared and she has to go and sort of make a deal with this sort of wicked fae prince to figure out what's happened, I believe. So it actually sounds kind of similar to Throne of the Fallen, which I'm a little bit worried about, but hopefully they're different enough that I enjoy both of them. That is the next one on TBR. And then another ebook that I have, which I really want to get to this autumn, is Spells for Forgetting by Adrienne Young. I was supposed to read this last autumn, but I ended up reading her new release that came out last year, which was The Unmaking of June Farrow. And I really enjoyed that. I loved her writing style as well. I think she has a really haunting but beautiful writing style, which really lends itself to the autumnal season. So I would really love to read this one in autumn. Otherwise, I'm gonna be so mad. I think it could probably work in winter as well, but I think autumn is the perfect time for it. And this is basically a little bit of a witchy book, but it's more so a mystery, I think. It's basically set in this small town. I believe that about 10 years ago, there was this murder. Our main character's best friend was killed, and her boyfriend at the time was accused of murder and ended up fleeing this small town. So now it's about 10 years later and he's come back, and it's kind of dredging up the old secrets, and I think the mystery is gonna unfold in the present time. That's all I really know. I'm very excited to read it. I think it's going to be really good. If it's anything like The Unmaking of June Farrow in terms of the writing style, I think I'm really going to enjoy it. Speaking of autumnal reads, I think this book is going to be the perfect book to read in November. I don't know what it is, but it just screams like November, autumnal, moving into winter sort of vibes. And that is Strange the Dreamer by Laini Taylor. I hate the fact that you cannot see the words on this cover, but it's Strange the Dreamer. Trust me. I clearly did not read this when it came out in 2016 like everyone else did, but I've always been interested in it, and I got it earlier this year and I was saving it till the autumn. But it basically follows our main character Laszlo Strange, and he has always been obsessed with this mythical lost city of Weep, and he basically gets the opportunity to go on sort of an adventure and try and uncover the secrets of Weep, and that's all I really know about it. But I'm very excited because I love Laini Taylor's writing style. I read Daughter of Smoke and Bone a few years ago and I actually reread it, and I really loved her writing style. I also just really enjoyed that book. I think it has a really interesting plot as well. However, I did not enjoy the rest of the series. I actually couldn't even get through the second book. So I'm excited to give another series by her a try and hopefully be more successful with this one. As I said, I love her writing style. So yeah, I'm excited to get to this one. And I think it's going to give me some nice autumnal vibes. Another book that I would like to read in November is Air by Sabaa Tahir. This is the first book in a new adult duology, which is set after the events of the An Ember in the Ashes series, which is kind of a shame because I don't own that series anymore, even though I did really enjoy it. But I ended up giving it to a friend because I just thought, oh, I won't reread it. But now, knowing that it's a continuation, I'm like, damn it, I want those books because I want to reread it, but it's okay. Anyway, and I actually started this a little while ago and I was just not in the mood for fantasy at the time. It was right before the wedding and I had so much on my mind that I could not focus. So I just thought, I'm going to put this down and come back to it at a later date. But now I feel like I'm doing better with my focus, so I could definitely read this, and I'd really like to get to this because I actually had an arc of it and now it's like way past release date. I'd like to get to this as soon as I can because I think I'm gonna love it, and also got an arc, so I feel bad that I haven't reviewed it yet. And finally, the last book on this way too large TBR is a very chunky book, and this is the book for that secret TBR video which I keep on mentioning, and that book is Realmbreaker by Victoria Aveyard, which is an absolute chunker of a book. How long is it actually? Okay, it's 570 pages, but actually the text is actually kind of big, so I feel like hopefully this won't be as slow of a read as I'm expecting. I do think it is going to be a slow read though, because I've heard that it is. So I'm not super excited to read this, but also I will be glad to have it off of my TBR. So yeah, I will be reading this in November. Absolutely, I must, because I would like to post that video. But yeah, this is the last book of my TBR. Oh, I don't know what it's about. I do believe it's a young adult fantasy, or maybe it's new adult. I'm not quite sure. And it says, a strange darkness is growing in the ward. Even Coraine Anna Marat can feel it. Tucked away in her small town at the edge of the sea, fate knocks on her door in the form of a mythical, immortal, and a lethal assassin who tell Coraine that she is the last of an ancient lineage with the power to save the world from destruction. Because a man who would burn kingdoms to the ground is raising an army unlike any seen before, bent on uprooting the foundations of the world. With poison in his heart and a stolen sword in his hand, he'll break the realm itself to claim it, and only Coraine can stop him. Alongside an unlikely group of reluctant allies, Coraine finds herself on a desperate journey to complete an impossible task with untold magic singing in her blood and the fate of the world on her shoulders. I actually think that sounds pretty good. I'm excited. I hadn't actually read the synopsis since I got it, but this was another one that we were getting rid of at the library, so I snatched it because I was like, I know Victoria Aveyard, even though I haven't read any of her books, but like, I remember that name, so let me give it a go. I'm more excited about this now, even though I'm still a little bit concerned. But anyway, these are all of the books that I either read in October or I'm planning to read in November, excluding obviously the ebooks. It's a pretty hefty stack. But yeah, that is all that I have for this video. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give a thumbs up. If you're new here, feel free to subscribe down below. And if you made it all the way to the end, please share with me down below what books you read in October and what books you're planning to read in November. And leave me the sword emoji for Realm Breaker if you made it all the way to the end. But that's all that I have. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you liked it. If you did, please give a thumbs up. I already did that. But yeah, that is all that I have. So I'll see you very soon with another video. Bye.